If you believe that a single moment can change a lifetime, be sure to like this story and subscribe for more tales of hope and destiny. Emily Carter's life was measured in minutes. The 5 minutes she could afford to stay in a hot shower. The 22 minutes the city bus took to get from her stop to the downtown core, provided it wasn't raining. The 30 minutes she had for a lunch she usually ate at her desk. But most importantly, it was measured by the minutes she was constantly in danger of losing. A minute late to clock in, a minute too long on a break, each one a tiny grain of sand slipping through the hourglass of her employment at Trident Logistics. Her world was a landscape of beige cubicles, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the ever-present cloying scent of stale coffee. At 28, she felt 40. The vibrant, artistic girl who had dreamed of designing book covers had been slowly eroded by the relentless tide of necessity. Her parents had passed away years earlier, leaving her not only with her own grief, but with the fierce protective responsibility for her younger sister, Maya. Maya was her sunshine, a brilliant student at community college who dreamed of becoming a nurse. Emily's paycheck was the scaffolding that kept that dream from collapsing. It paid for their small apartment, Maya's tuition, the groceries, the utilities, a fragile fortress built on a foundation of spreadsheets and data entry. Her boss, Mr. Harrison, was a man whose soul seemed to have been replaced by a stopwatch. He was short, impeccably dressed, and perpetually frowning, as if the world consistently failed to meet his standards of efficiency. He didn't manage people, he managed metrics. To him, Emily wasn't a person. She was employee 734, an asset whose performance was charted in red and black ink. Last week, a subway breakdown had made her 10 minutes late, and he had delivered his final warning with a chilling lack of emotion. "The next infraction, Ms. Carter," he'd said, his eyes fixed on his monitor, "will result in the termination of your employment. Trident values punctuality above all else." He didn't care that she'd worked through her lunch every day that week to catch up. He didn't care that she was one of his most meticulous employees. The clock was judge, jury, and executioner. This particular Tuesday began with a betrayal. The alarm on her phone, her trusted digital gatekeeper, failed to go off. She awoke with a jolt, not to its cheerful chime, but to a sliver of sunlight cutting through her blinds, a sunbeam that was far too bright for 6 a.m. A glance at the clock sent a surge of pure adrenaline through her veins. 7:15 a.m. She had to be at her desk, logged in, and actively processing invoices by 8:30 a.m. sharp. The next 20 minutes were a frantic blur. She skipped the shower, threw on the first professional-looking clothes she could find, and scribbled a quick note for Maya, who was an angel and would never complain about having to eat cereal for dinner. "Running super late, love you. E." She grabbed her worn-out tote bag, her keys, and a half-eaten granola bar from the counter before bursting out the door. The apartment building's elevator, of course, was out of order. She clattered down 3 flights of stairs, her breath catching in her chest, a stitch already forming in her side. She reached the bus stop just in time to see the taillights of the 805 Express pulling away from the curb. "No, no, no," she whispered, her heart sinking into her stomach. The next one wasn't for 15 minutes. 15 precious minutes she didn't have. She could already feel Mr. Harrison's cold, disappointed glare. She could picture the red line on her attendance chart growing thicker. The next bus was packed, a rolling tin can of communal misery. Emily squeezed herself into a spot near the door, clutching a pole as the bus lurched through the morning traffic. She checked her phone every 30 seconds, watching the minutes tick by with a growing sense of dread. 8:10, 8:20, 8:25. They were crawling. "An accident up ahead," the driver announced. A fender bender was blocking a lane. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to quell the panic rising in her throat. Maybe, just maybe, she could still make it. If she ran from the bus stop, if every traffic light turned green in her favor, she might just slide into her chair at 8:29 and 59 seconds. The bus finally arrived downtown at 8:38, 9 minutes late already, assuming she could teleport to her desk. Her career at Trident was over. The thought was so terrifying it was paralyzing. Still, she had to try. She bolted from the bus, weaving through the slow-moving pedestrians on the sidewalk, her tote bag banging against her hip. Her office building was just 2 blocks away. She could see it, a soulless tower of glass and steel. And then she saw him, an elderly man, his back stooped with age, was standing by the entrance of a small corner store. A brown paper grocery bag in his arms had just ripped open. A cascade of oranges tumbled out. rolling across the grimy sidewalk like runaway sons. An apple followed, then a can of soup that clattered loudly before settling in the gutter. The man let out a soft, defeated sigh. People streamed past him, a river of suits and briefcases, their faces locked on their phones, their destinations all important. No one stopped. No one even seemed to notice. Emily skidded to a halt. Her mind screamed at her, "Keep going! You're finished if you stop. Harrison is waiting." But her feet wouldn't move. She saw the tremor in the old man's hands as he bent down stiffly to try and retrieve a rolling orange. She saw the exhaustion in his face. And in that moment she didn't see a stranger. She saw her grandfather, who had spent his last years struggling with arthritis, too proud to ask for help. Her job was already lost. What was another minute? "Let me help you with that," she said, her voice a little breathless. The man looked up, his pale blue eyes surprised. "Oh, you don't have to, dear. You look like you're in a hurry." "It's no trouble," Emily insisted, already kneeling to gather the scattered groceries. She chased down the oranges, wiped the grime off the soup can with the sleeve of her blouse, and carefully placed everything into her own sturdy tote bag. "Your bag is torn. We can ask for another one inside." She helped him into the store, where the cashier gave them a new bag. As they repacked the items, the man, who introduced himself as Arthur, placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm and sincere. Very few people would have stopped. He looked at her, his gaze clear and kind. "Kindness always finds its way back to us, you know." Emily just nodded, a lump forming in her throat. It was such a simple, old-fashioned sentiment, but it struck a chord in her weary soul. Arthur's eyes drifted to the large, colorful sign behind the counter. A massive Powerball jackpot was advertised in flashing numbers. $488 million. "Maybe your luck changes today," he said with a little smile, gesturing toward the sign. Normally, Emily would have dismissed it. The lottery was a tax on the poor, a fool's hope. She had never bought a ticket in her life. Her money was too carefully budgeted for such fantasies. But today was different. She had already lost her job. She was sure of it. A strange, reckless feeling washed over her, the dizzying freedom of someone who has nothing left to lose. She looked in her wallet. A single, crisp $5 bill was tucked into a side pocket. It was her lunch money for the rest of the week. "I'll take one Powerball ticket," she heard herself say. The words felt foreign in her mouth. The cashier printed it out, and she filled in the numbers without thinking. Maya's birthday, her old street address, the age she was when her mom passed. A combination of meaningless, meaningful numbers. She tucked the small slip of paper into her coat pocket, thanked Arthur again, and left the store. It was 8:46 a.m. When she finally pushed through the glass doors of Trident Logistics, the office was quiet. All heads were down, the rhythmic clicking of keyboards filling the air, and standing by her empty desk, his arms crossed, was Mr. Harrison. His face was a thundercloud. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice dangerously low. A few of her co-workers looked up, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "It is 8:47. What is your explanation?" "Mr. Harrison, I'm so sorry. My alarm didn't. The bus was late, there was an accident, and She trailed off. What could she say? I stopped to help an old man and then bought a lottery ticket? It sounded like the most pathetic excuse in the world. He held up a hand, silencing her. "Save it. I am not interested in excuses. I am interested in results. And the results show that you are incapable of adhering to the basic standards of this company." He looked around the office, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "Punctuality is a reflection of respect. It is a reflection of discipline and commitment. Trident Logistics cannot abide by anything less." He turned his cold eyes back to her. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Please pack your personal belongings. Security will escort you out." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stood there, stunned, as he walked away without a backward glance. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She could feel the eyes of her colleagues on her back. Someone had already placed a small cardboard box on her chair. Numbly, she packed her things, a framed photo of her and Maya, a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Sister," a wilting succulent. It was a pathetic collection, the sum of 4 years of her life. 20 minutes later, she was standing on the sidewalk, the cardboard box in her arms and the city's indifferent traffic rushing past her. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with the force of a tidal wave. She had no job. She had less than $200 in her bank account. Rent was due next week. How was she going to tell Maya? Her hand went into her coat pocket, her fingers closing around the flimsy piece of paper tucked inside. The lottery ticket. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Arthur had said kindness finds its way back. He'd said her luck might change. Instead, a moment of kindness had cost her everything. The ticket wasn't a symbol of hope. It was a receipt for her own ruin. The walk home was a funeral procession for the life Emily thought she had. The city sounds, the blare of horns, the distant wail of a siren, the chatter of people on their lunch breaks, all seemed to be happening behind a thick wall of glass. She clutched the cardboard box to her chest as if it were a life raft, though it contained nothing but the debris of a sunken ship. Her apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt like a cage. The cheerful note she'd left for Maya on the kitchen counter now read like a cruel joke. Running super late. It was a dispatch from a different person, a woman who still had a job to be late for. She spent the afternoon in a digital purgatory, scrolling through job listings on her laptop. Administrative assistant, office manager, data entry clerk. Each title was a variation of the same beige prison she had just been ejected from. She updated her resume, the words feeling like lies. Detail-oriented, proactive, excellent time management skills. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. She fired off a dozen applications, each one feeling like a message in a bottle thrown into a vast, indifferent ocean. Maya came home just after 5, her face bright with the energy of a day spent learning and laughing with friends. "Em, I'm home. Guess what Professor Davis said about my clinical proposal?" She stopped short when she saw Emily sitting on the couch, surrounded by the faint glow of her laptop screen, the cardboard box from her desk sitting on the floor like a tombstone. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, her cheerful tone evaporating. "What's that box?" Emily couldn't meet her sister's eyes. She just shook her head, and the tears she'd been holding back all day finally began to fall. Maya was by her side in an instant, her arms wrapping around Emily's shaking shoulders. Between sobs, Emily choked out the story, the alarm, the bus, the old man, the 7-minute delay, and Mr. Harrison's cold final words. When she finished, she braced herself for Maya's disappointment, for the inevitable questions about rent and bills. Instead, Maya squeezed her tighter. "Good," she said fiercely. Emily pulled back, confused. "Good? Maya, I lost my job." "How is that good?" "Because that job was sucking the life out of you," Maya said, her eyes flashing with a loyalty that was more valuable than any paycheck. "You hated it, Em. You came home exhausted every single day. Mr. Harrison was a tyrant, so he fired you for being 7 minutes late after you stopped to help someone? That says everything about him and nothing about you." She took Emily's hands in her own. "We'll figure it out. We always do." In that moment, Emily's despair didn't vanish, but it felt less suffocating. Maya's unwavering faith was a pinprick of light in the darkness. They spent the evening eating leftover pasta and making a budget, a grim but familiar ritual. The numbers were terrifying, but together they felt manageable. They had a little over a month before things got truly desperate. The lottery ticket lay forgotten in the pocket of the coat she'd worn that day, a coat she'd tossed onto a chair and hadn't looked at since. 2 days passed. A rejection email arrived from one of the jobs she'd applied for, an automated, impersonal message that still stung. The reality of her unemployment began to set in, a low, constant hum of anxiety. On Thursday night, they were watching a movie, a cheap rental to keep their spirits up. During a commercial break, a local news anchor came on screen with a beaming smile. "The search is on for a multi-millionaire," he announced cheerfully. A single winning ticket for last night's $488 million Powerball jackpot was sold right here in the city, at a corner store on Elm Street. The winning numbers are... Emily barely heard him. She was scrolling through her phone, looking at more job listings. But Maya sat up straight. "Elm Street? Isn't that near your old office?" she asked. "Hey, didn't you say you bought a ticket?" Emily waved her hand dismissively. "Yeah, 1 ticket. Maya, the odds are like 1 in 300 million. It's a waste of money." "But you never buy tickets," Maya pressed, her curiosity piqued. "Just check it, for fun. What have we got to lose?" "Our dignity," Emily muttered, but she saw the hopeful look in her sister's eyes. It was a silly, impossible fantasy, but it was a distraction from their very real problems. With a heavy sigh, she got up and retrieved the coat from the chair. Her fingers brushed against the small, crisp slip of paper in the pocket. It felt insignificant. "Okay, fine. she said, walking back to the couch. What were the numbers? Maya pulled up the lottery website on her phone. Ready? She said, her voice laced with playful excitement. First number is 8. Emily looked at the ticket. The first number, the one from Maya's birthday, was 8. Okay, got that, she said, her tone flat. Next, 14. Emily's breath hitched. Her old street address had been 14. Yeah, got that too. Maya's smile widened. No way. Okay, next is 22. Emily stared at the ticket. 22. It's here. A strange feeling, a tiny flutter of disbelief started in her stomach. Stop it, are you serious? Maya leaned closer, trying to see the ticket. Okay, don't move. Next number, 43. It was there. Emily's hand began to shake just slightly. Maya, and 51, Maya said, her voice barely a whisper now. Emily's eyes scanned the last number in the sequence. 51. They all matched. Her entire body felt cold. Okay, Maya breathed, her eyes wide. The Powerball. It's 16. Emily's gaze dropped to the final circled number at the end of the line. The age her mother had been when she'd had Emily. 16. She looked from the ticket to the phone screen, then back to the ticket. The numbers blurred. The room fell completely silent, the sound from the television fading into nothing. Emily? Maya whispered. Do they? Emily couldn't speak. She could only nod, a slow, jerky movement, and then she began to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a wild, unhinged sound, full of shock and disbelief and the cosmic absurdity of it all. Maya grabbed the ticket and the phone, her eyes darting between them, and then she started screaming, a joyous, piercing shriek of pure, unadulterated shock. The two sisters fell into each other's arms, a tangle of laughter and tears and shouts of, "Oh my God!" Their poverty, their fears, and their entire world shattering and rearranging itself in that single, impossible moment. The weeks that followed were a surreal dream of lawyers, financial advisors, and hushed phone calls. Emily chose the lump sum payment and, after taxes, became the stunned custodian of more money than her family had seen in 10 generations. But the first thing she did as a millionaire wasn't to buy a car or a house. It was to pay off Maya's student loans in a single transaction, an act that made them both weep with relief. Her second act was to find a new, safe, beautiful apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a place with big windows and a small balcony where she could grow flowers. One afternoon, sitting in her new sun-filled living room, she thought of Mr. Harrison. There was no anger left, only a strange sense of pity. She made a call to her new financial manager. A week later, an anonymous endowment was made to Trident Logistics, specifically to create the Sunshine Fund, a discretionary fund for administrative employees facing personal emergencies or transportation issues, ensuring no one else would be fired for a late bus or a moment of bad luck. But there was one more piece of her past she needed to address. She went back to the corner store on Elm Street. The same cashier was there, and he remembered her. "You're the winner," he exclaimed. Emily just smiled and asked if he knew an elderly gentleman named Arthur who frequented the store. The cashier knew him well. Arthur was a widower, a retired postal worker who lived alone a few blocks away. Emily didn't approach him with a check. Instead, she used a portion of her winnings to establish the Arthur Project, a non-profit foundation dedicated to providing free grocery delivery and in-home assistance to senior citizens in the city's underserved neighborhoods. She hired a small, compassionate staff and funded it for the next 50 years. She named Arthur as the honorary chairman, and when she finally met with him to explain, the look of stunned, tearful gratitude in his pale blue eyes was worth more than any jackpot. "I told you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Kindness always finds its way back." The story ends not in a mansion, but in the quiet comfort of a life reclaimed. Maya, free from financial worry, aced her nursing exams and began her career with a joyful heart. Emily, finally free from the tyranny of the clock, enrolled in a graphic design program. Her days were spent not with spreadsheets, but with sketchbooks and color palettes. On her new drafting table, propped up in a simple silver frame, was the lottery ticket. It wasn't a trophy celebrating her wealth. It was a receipt. A reminder that her life hadn't been saved by $488 million. It had been saved by 7 minutes. 7 minutes of humanity, a handful of scattered oranges on a dirty sidewalk, and the courage to stop. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest stroke of luck isn't winning the lottery, but being fired from a life you were never meant to live. The journey of Emily Carter teaches us that the universe has unexpected ways of putting us on the right path. What appears to be a disaster, the loss of a job, can actually be a liberation from a life that no longer serves us. The lesson is that true luck is not found in chance but in the choices we make, especially in the small acts of kindness that seem insignificant. The prize money becomes just a tool for Emily to build a life of purpose, proving that the greatest windfalls don't just change our bank account, but reveal who we really are. If this story reminded you that hope can be found in the most unexpected places, please give it a like and subscribe for more.